Today's video is going to be about my thoughts on our Disneyland trip coming from a Disney World perspective. So we are huge Disney World fans, and this time we went to Disneyland, and so I kind of just wanted to compare the difference, the things we loved, the things we missed about Disney World, and my overall thoughts on like which one is our favorite. A big difference was Magicbands and just how all of that worked, because you actually couldn't use your Magicband for as many things at Disneyland, so I kind of missed that. I talked about this in one of our vlogs, but basically you can't use it to get into your room. You have to use the hotel key. You also can't use it to purchase things. So when you're at Disney World, you can use your Magicband to purchase things and it goes on your hotel room bill. And you couldn't do that at Disneyland. So I just ended up using my Apple Watch and pretending it was a Magicband. So you pretty much were just using it like in the fast pass lanes to get in there. Another thing I noticed, I felt like there were not a lot of rides that had photos. And even when it did have a photo, it's like it didn't track it with the Magicband. You had to be careful when you got off the ride to look for the number of your photo so you could add it. When you looked at your photos in the app, you would like manually add the photo. Someone tell me if I'm doing this wrong, but like in Disney World, you have the photos and they just automatically show up in your photo account. Anyways, I just thought that was a little bit less automatic. Okay, another thing as a newbie to Disneyland is that I did miss having the feature in the app where it gives you directions of where to go. Like, it did have a map and it would say find that thing on the map, but usually on the Disney World app I can also say like take me there and it'll show me the best route. And because I'm kind of a newbie at Disneyland, I didn't know the best route or which way would be faster, so that would have been nice to have. So I just kind of felt discombobulated, especially the first couple days, and we were only there for 4 days, so I was just kind of getting the hang of it by the end of our trip. Okay, and I have to mention, of course, one of the big differences is the castle. So while the castle at Disneyland is super cute, it does feel a little bit underwhelming when you're used to walking in and seeing that big, beautiful castle. Like, you feel like you can barely see it at the end of Main Street. So our kids were like, whoa, they were so surprised by how small it was. And you just kind of like walk through it. There's not like a restaurant in there. And, you know, at Disney World, there's a restaurant, there's a hotel room that, I don't know, special people get to stay in sometimes. I don't know how you get into there, but anyways, it was just not as exciting as the Disney World castle. I'm sorry, Disneyland. Let's talk about some positives about Disneyland, because I feel like I've been kind of talking about all the things I don't like so far. So one of the things that is amazing at both parks is, of course, the musicians are amazing at both, but I don't know, I just feel like at Disneyland, I don't know if it's because they're in California where all of these artists are that, you know, are performing in music with like movies and different things. I don't know. You know, Richard, my husband's a musician, and he just really loved all the musicians at Disneyland, the bands and stuff that are walking around. So we loved all the music and the entertainers at Disney. I also felt like they had more benches and little places to sit. So while it was like congested in some areas, there also were a lot of places to sit and relax if you found the right alcoves. And I'm sure if I was a Disneyland regular, I would figure out where all of those places are, but I did feel like that was nice. And I feel like, you know, you go to Epcot and there's like no place to sit to eat your food. You're always like standing at a bench or on a trash can. So it felt so luxurious to have these little benches. You know, actually one of the main reasons we went to Disneyland instead of Disney World is we were going in August, and I just knew it's going to be miserable in August in Florida. I mean, we've done August several times in Florida and we can do it, we can handle it, but it is so exhausting. We always have to go back really early in the day to the hotel and take a break. I mean, it's just you step outside, even if it's 8 a.m. and it's oppressive. So we went to Disneyland because partially because I just knew the weather would be better in August. And that was nice. It did get hot in the middle of the day. I still felt like we were getting hot, but we lasted a lot longer. And in the morning, it was actually super enjoyable before it got to the main heat of the day. So in the morning and the evening, it was gorgeous. And it just got hot in the middle, but it still was not as hot as Disney World. So weather is definitely a pro at Disneyland. One thing that I thought was a pro as someone with little kids is when we went into Disneyland, we didn't have to do a fingerprint. We just, did the tapping of the band. So I don't know, if you have little kids, you know what I'm talking about. When you go to Disney World, they have these little tiny fingers, and James still has little fingers, even though he's 11. And so he always has to be so careful to lay it the proper way on the fingerprint so that when we go in every other time the rest of the trip, it's not like we're getting stopped by and having to have someone help us get, checked in. So anyways, I did like that we just didn't have to worry about the fingerprint at Disneyland. Another thing that we loved was just the proximity. I mean, if you're staying close to Disneyland, there's just a lot of hotels that are within walking distance. So we were at Pixar Place, and even if we were going to Disneyland, like Pixar Place is really close to California Adventure, but even at Disneyland, it took I think it was less than 10 minutes to walk from our hotel to be at security. It was very quick. And so what I loved about that, it made it really doable to go back and forth in the middle of the day, and you're not like allowing an hour to get, from the park back to, on the bus back to the hotel. So it just makes it really easy to go back and forth. And we always like to take a break in the middle of the day. So I definitely liked that, just the proximity of a lot of hotels to the parks. Okay, now this is something that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, but would be a major downside to me going to Disneyland. And this is the fact that there is no standby skipper, okay? I am addicted to standby skipper, and I feel like it's even more important at Disneyland right now with the way that Genie Plus works than it is at Disney World. I'm still gonna use it at Disney World because when I use up my first 3 that I've pre-booked, then it can help me find more, I guess we don't call it Genie Plus anymore, but it'll help me find more lightning lanes that maybe are even gone, you think, but it'll find them. So I am going to use it in Disney World, but in Disneyland, you have to remember they're still using that old Fast Pass system where you don't pre-book and you're just booking it one by one throughout the day. And I really miss Standby Skipper because when you went to get one, and let's say one of the rides is sold out or something, or it's like pushed back a ways, we just had to keep refreshing like the old school way. Whereas before, if I had Standby Skipper, I would just put in, hey, we want this night ride next for this time frame, and it probably would have found it really easily. So I found like I was back on my phone a ton, and it was just more stressful because I was also adjusting to a whole new park. And, I'm a perfectionist and a crazy person. So, I want to get everything right, but I definitely missed Standby Skipper. Now, this might not always be the case. Maybe Standby Skipper will have availability at Disneyland eventually, but I felt like that was something I super, super missed going to Disneyland. One thing that was definitely an adjustment was rope dropping. And there's some pros and there's some cons to rope dropping at Disneyland, okay? As a Disney World person, I feel like a lot more people are rope dropping at Disney World. And so when you get in the park, it is empty, but Disneyland rope drop was like really, really empty. So that is the really nice thing about Disneyland is, there aren't that many people staying at Disney hotels. And so there's just not as many people at early entry. So early entry was very empty at Disneyland. Here's my problem. It's just 30 minutes. We didn't always make it in the park to appreciate all 30 minutes. You can do it at Disneyland easily, but I would just warn everybody that's staying at the Pixar Place Hotel, and I watched a video, I knew this ahead of time and I did not listen, that you should not rope drop from the Pixar Place entrance to California Adventure. This is my very strong opinion. You need to go to the front of California Adventure. And the reason for that is because you would think, oh, but I'm saving time. I'm just walking it's a shorter walk. I'm going to get in line earlier. No, the reason why it doesn't work is because you have to get there so early because they don't start even checking in for the security at Pixar Place until about 7:20, and then at 7:30 is when it starts. So we got there like 7:15 or so. It was like 15 minutes early to line up. But because there were so many people in front of us, they started checking them in, but the security, and this is another thing I missed, it went super slow because they had to look inside each person's bag. And so even when we rope dropped Disneyland, we walked over to California Adventure and it was a super long line and they had to look through everybody's bag. And so it just was very slow. So it's nice to have the early entry, but usually you're going through those lines at the hotel and it's going to take a while. So you really need to get there early. Now we kind of learned our lesson and Disneyland went better when we rope dropped that. But when we went through the Pixar Place entrance, I wouldn't do that again. I would go to the front because I've heard they actually start entering and doing security at the front of California Adventure earlier than they do at the Pixar Place. And I'm guessing it's because like Pixar Place, you basically like check in and you're in the park and it's right there and there's not a lot of room. So I'm guessing they don't want to start letting everybody in super early, but it just makes it tricky. So I would say the early entry was just a big adjustment for me. I loved how empty the park was, but I felt like the security and all of that, I would watch more videos and be really prepared for that next time. I thought I did, but now I would be even more careful about planning for that. You know, I really expected Disneyland to have just like way better food than Disney World. But I don't know if it's just Disney World has upped their game or, you know, I didn't have that many days at Disneyland, so maybe I didn't hit the best spots, but I felt like they were pretty on par. You know, there's good and bad things at Disney World, and there's good and bad things at Disneyland Park. You know, there are some that are impressive and some that are park food. And of course, if you know the right things, I think there's great things at both places. I do think that I like having more, I feel like there's just more options at Disney World because there's 4 parks and then there's a million hotels, and then the hotels have fancy restaurants. And so there's just a million places you can eat. And so I feel like there's just more choices at Disney World. So I did like that. But yeah, not a huge difference on the food there, which was surprising to me. And then finally, I just want to talk about the rides. So if you're coming from Disney World versus Disneyland, Disneyland does not have a lot of rides that we don't have at Disney World. So just think of it from my kids' perspective. Okay, we're getting there and Disneyland has a ton of rides, right? They've got all the Star Wars rides, the Marvel stuff. They've got a ton of stuff. But my kids are going, hey, we're going to Disneyland. We want to do the stuff that's different, right? So what is different? They have a lot of nostalgic rides. So I'd say if you have like little kids that like the little dark rides, Disneyland has a lot of those, although I will say a lot of the dark rides, at least at Disneyland, are kind of scary or creepy. But so they have some nostalgic rides at Disneyland that we don't have, you know, and they have like the originals. And, you know, if they do have the same ride, I would say that a lot of times the Disneyland version might be a little better. Like Pirates, I think most people think that's better at Disneyland. Big Thunder, I do think that was a little bit longer and better at Disneyland. So Space Mountain, we unfortunately did not get to ride Disneyland's because it was closed when we were there, but I've heard that one is definitely better as well. So there are some that are better, but if you think about what do they have that we don't have, not a lot. Basically, Space Mountain we already have, it's just better. I would say they have the Marvel area. But, you know, Guardians is a ride we have. We have Tower of Terror. It's just a different version. So it's really just the web slinger that's new. And then the other big ride that we were excited about was the Incredicoaster. So I will say the Incredicoaster was like our big ride that the kids enjoyed that we don't have at Disney World. That was our big one. But other than that, most of them we have very similar. And there's a lot that they don't have at Disneyland. They don't have Tron. They don't have Guardians. They don't have the Avatar ride, the Flight of Passage. So some of those really big rides they don't have. Now they still have Rise. They have Tiana's Bayou. They're going to have all those same ones. But if you're trying, and they have Mickey and Minnie's. But again, Disney World, we have all those. So I just thought that was really interesting because they do have a ton, but there's only 2 parks. So just coming from a Disney World perspective of kids that are my kids' age, which are preteen, teen, they didn't have a lot of big rides they were super excited about. We could have gone on Rise, but again, we have that. We're trying to do different things, and we love that ride. They have Smuggler's Run. We did that one, but yeah, not a lot of things we don't have at Disney World other than a bunch of old rides. And those were fun, but just not super exciting, right? For the kids, my kids' age. Let me say one other thing. For Disneyland, of course, it's the history, seeing the lamp that had like for Walt's apartment and seeing some of that original stuff. And like we looked for like this little light that was painted red and white because they had mixed up the lights and then Walt had them painted both colors. So it went with it, just these little history things. I do think that Disneyland wins on that, of course. But what are my thoughts overall? Are we going back to Disneyland? We are. I would like to go back to Disneyland, but I was a little surprised that I don't think we'll be going back as frequently as I thought. I think, maybe in 5 years, if they've added a few things, we'll maybe go check that out. But in general, we're Disney World fans, and we just feel like there's so much more at the Disney World parks. There's more of a bubble, like when you're going from the hotel to the parks, you're either on a bus or you're on Disney property the whole time. So I just like all the options it has to keep my family excited, and for the next day, there's just so many things to do. So I will say we'll go back to Disneyland, but just maybe every 5 years, whereas Disney World, I want to go back like every year. So I hope that helped give you a few things to think about as you plan. Maybe you're a Disney World person thinking about going to Disneyland. It was definitely a fun thing to mix it up, but maybe I think some of my thoughts are a little different than some people. So hopefully that was helpful just to think it through. So thanks for joining me today, and I hope you stay tuned for more Disney videos. Thanks.